Today is the second one, the second webinar in this 5-week series that I'm planning to do. Thanks if you were with us last time and for joining today as well. And again, I'm following the book, The Practice of Astrology by Rudhyar, which we decided to try to cover together and speak about different small articles that he has actually included in that book. And today the topic is the meaning of the signs, the houses, and the planets in the chart. And these constitute some of those 13 basic steps for acquiring astrological wisdom that Rudhyar is talking about in the book. We covered 1 to 3 last time, and today it's going to be step 5, 6, and 7. Actually, no, 4, 5, and 6, excuse me. So 4, 5, and 6. And they are concentrating on these particular topics in humanistic astrology and from his perspective of how we can make sense of the order of the houses, this zodiac as a concept, and also the planets as part of the solar system as a whole. You can see on Chaldea.com the book, so that's the same as last time. You can take a look at the other things that are published on this website, which is the majority of the work by Rudhyar, and a lot of the very basic books that the practice of astrology is just one of. And today we start with step 4 from the book. That's called A Clear Understanding of the Meaning of Zodiacal Signs and Houses. And I've got a quote for you. You cannot really understand the behavior of any organ of the human body unless you see it as a specialized field of cellular activity to which a basic organic function is performed. This function is depending on other functions for its operation. It is usually balanced by another function having an opposite or contrasting character. The healthy operation of every function always depends on the delicate interplay between all the functions of the body, and not only of the body, but also the psychic and mental levels of activity. This is so evident that one should hardly have to speak of it. Yet in practice, this evidence is rarely considered as a basic factor in either medical diagnosis or astrological birth chart interpretation. It certainly is not given the place it should have in textbooks of astrology. And nearly all astrologers are haunted by the archaic concept according to which a planet is like a god who does something to you and whose doings can be characterized as fortunate or unfortunate. Yet, would it make any sense to say that the liver is good and the large intestine or kidney is bad? Well, this is it's rather long, but I wanted to give you all of it because we are going to be revolving today around this main idea of trying to get ourselves little by little out of the habits of always splitting things into individual parts, studying information about separate signs of the zodiac, houses, or whatever else, without asking ourselves what's the function that this thing plays within the whole picture, within the whole system, and why does it mean what it means? What's its position and how the position determines the meaning? And ultimately, what is always kind of repeated again and again in those concepts, that the whole is somehow more important than the individual parts. And that we need to start from the whole. We need to look at it, study it a little bit, maybe kind of distance ourselves from it so that we can understand how each one of those things, like the parts of the body that Rudhyar is speaking about, are playing their part that cannot be interchanged with any other. It is very essential, it is unique, it is necessary for the life of the whole organism. And it cannot go without, the whole cannot go without the parts, but also what the parts are, how they function, what they do, what they have as temperament, as energy, as particular, kind of a task that they have been given, is affecting back to the big organism and to its health, psychological, or physical. So today we're going to be trying to look at the zodiac signs as subdivisions of the ecliptic or the tropical zodiac and the yearly solar cycle. The tropical zodiac, or what we call the ecliptic astronomically, I will show you some graphics of that so we can illustrate it and really try to picture, to imagine what this is about, is actually this traveling of the sun during the year. In fact, we, the people on the earth and the whole planet, is the one traveling. We are going around the sun in one yearly cycle. But it seems like it's the other way around, because we are here, we're observing the sky, and it seems like the sun is changing its position on the background of the sky. And that background of the sky is the one on which we project the zodiac as an energy field. But the zodiac signs are parts of one whole thing, which is called the tropical zodiac. And we would need to investigate a little bit what the whole is. Then the houses of the chart, another type of subdivision that we are so used to interchangeably very often use with the signs of the zodiac. Most astrologers are imagining both of them as divisions of space in which we project the planets. So we take the circle of the chart, we draw that, we divide it into the houses and into the signs, and everything is within this frame of reference. All the planets fall in there. But I'm going to try to explain what's the difference, because it's a crucial difference. And Dane Rudhyar asserts many times that you cannot really be a very good astrologer if you don't have the explanation for yourself and this logical kind of connection and knowledge of what these two are really about and how they're different, how they're not the same kind of space that is being divided into separate 12 parts. It's very confusing because we have 12 signs, we have 12 houses, and it's very tempting to associate things that we know about, say, Aries with the first house, with Taurus with the second house, and so on, but they are not the same thing. And I hope I will be able to give you a bit of more clarity of how and why they're not the same thing. But the houses are, again, part of some whole. The whole space around us when we're born, or around anything or anybody that is born in a particular moment, the physical space, the territory. You know, what's up there in the sky, what's down there if you go towards the center of the earth, what's on the east, what's in the west. Spatially, literally what we can see around us, and how much of the sky we can actually observe, because we're living on a planet that is a globe, and obviously we are not going to have the same picture depending on where on this globe we are standing. If you are born somewhere further north, you're going to see a certain sector, a certain part of the the background. But if you're born closer to the equator, it's a totally different picture. That's the chief reason why it's so important to know the place of birth of someone, and then adding to that the information about the time, you can really calculate the houses. The planets are also following the same trajectory of, they don't mean anything separately, or at least we can't really figure out the real meaning before we look at the structure of the solar system and where they fall in that structure in order, and also other things about them like their size, their orbital periods, and things like this. But again, we have to look at the system first so that we can see what's the position of Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, and so on, and assume, deduct from there their function and their role in the birth chart. Okay, we're going to get more concrete as we go along. Starting from the zodiac. And this first step of the tree that I'm looking at today will be a bit of an overview and juxtaposition between the zodiac and the houses. And here we've got this quote: "The zodiac is a universal matrix, thus a place. Yet a matrix is not an ordinary kind of space. It is an electromagnetic field upon which formative powers are focused. It is the living substance in the process of being built into an organism. It is not a house or a collection of neatly divided spaces, but the crucible of life. This may be a bit difficult to decipher from first read, as it's very philosophical in a way. But let's try to like give a bit of an explanation here. The way I understand it is that he's saying the zodiac is also some sort of space around us, and it's the tropical zodiac, the path of the sun, the time it takes from spring equinox to the next spring equinox. It's not the constellations of stars on the sky that we call Aries, Taurus, Gemini, and so on. These are two separate things as well. But the zodiac is a universal matrix, almost like an aura. It is a belt around the Earth, which is encompassing a certain area where something that he calls formative powers, formative energies. Let's say the things that bring life, or the things that differentiate different energies and different modes of operation that are part of the overall life pattern, but they're split into their individual functions. They live there in this belt of the zodiac, and they are potentially to be activated by something. So the sun traveling to a particular sign of the zodiac can activate the qualities of that energy and somehow transfer it and give it substance here on earth or in somebody's life and so on. And this living substance that the zodiac represents is not just any sort of area out there in space, which we divide mentally in our head into 12 sections. It is something more energized that can bring and can activate forces when it interacts with the solar energy. And this is not the same as a house. The house in the chart and in principle is the physical space around you here on Earth. It is more centered on our perception of what's the horizon in front of me, how much I can see forward, how much of the sky above I can perceive, and what is left hidden because it's kind of the other portion of the sky that remains underneath the surface, underneath our feet, and we cannot in any particular moment actually see. So it's an orientation in the space. Well, here we've got what he calls the crucible of life, and it's a more magical, a more special kind of space out there that we will be examining today. And now, let's take a look at how the tropical zodiac doesn't correspond exactly, not anymore. We touched on this a little bit last time, but here let's take a bit more of a moment to see what's really going on. Tropical and sidereal zodiacs not being the same thing. We have this long astrological tradition that is very it is ancient, it is archaic in a way, and not a lot of it is up to date to what we are going through, living through, psychologically, physically, whatever, the way life functions today in our modern times. And it needed modernization, a lot of which then Rudhyar did in his work, bringing it up to the findings of depth psychology and what we need today as a reference point when we call this circle of energies around the Earth, the zodiac, our formative powers. And back in the past, people were not having any sense of the solar system. They didn't know until very recently, actually, and this is quite strange from our perspective maybe today, that the Earth is part of a system, just one of many planets, that they all revolve around the sun. Until very, very recently, actually, there was this notion of the geocentric world, that everything is revolving around us, that those dots in the sky are actually centering their attention and their purpose to us. We are the most important thing. We are the most important piece of life. And everything changed when we were able, for the first time, to observe the solar system the way we know it today, and to realize that we are just one part of a bigger play. And here we can see the tropical zodiac as a path of the sun, starting from this is our chosen starting point in astrology, the vernal equinox, the equinox in the spring. This is what we count as the 0 point, where we find the sun there every year, is the beginning of the sign Aries. And then after we travel 1/4 of that cycle, we reach the next focal point, which is the summer solstice. There, we were at the beginning of Cancer. Next, we reach the next equinox, the other equinox, in the fall, the beginning of Libra. And the 4th point is the start of Capricorn and the winter solstice. So these are marking in time, actually, of how long it takes the sun to go from point 1 to point 2 to point 3 and to point 4. And we are going through experiences here in Earth that are connected to the seasons. Certain things happen in spring, they affect us in a particular way. Everything in nature starts growing and emerging for new life. And the qualities of those three first signs of the zodiac, Aries, Taurus, and Gemini, have so much to do with the processes in nature, those seasonal processes of gradual development, emergence and development of life, which can be juxtaposed to also the process of growing up as a person, a baby getting born and going to different steps of development. And then reaching a certain point of maturity, let's say, in Cancer, for example, where it can now switch direction. It is going through a trial of maybe crisis of experience that is now going to bring it into another realm, the realm of the next 3 signs of the zodiac, where something else is supposed to happen. And we're having this gradual juxtaposition of light and darkness in the zodiac. When we start from Aries, they are equal. We have equal days, equal night and equal day. And gradually from Aries, the day starts increasing, the light starts increasing. We can say also the consciousness, the individuality, the impulse for life. And it is a differentiation process. So we become more and more separate, more and more understanding how we are and what we are as separate people in a very similar way as a growing up child is gradually coming to, figuring out that it exists, that it's a persona, and then this persona is going through stages over time. As we go to the next signs of the zodiac, the light gradually gets bigger and bigger and bigger until it comes to Cancer, and it's as big as it can possibly be. So we have the longest days and the shortest nights. From there, everything switches again. The ebb and flow of the process switches and then goes to the light starting to decrease, so that when we come to Libra, or the other side of the process from the beginning, the opposition from Aries, we're having equal days and equal nights again. Here we have the first side, the first 6 signs, having been going through something that we can very generally say. I mean, this is totally not the whole story, but very, very generally, we can imagine that as building personality, building separate entities. They're going through different stages in the different signs of the zodiac where they're learning lessons. They're going through experiences, and something is, accumulated until we reach the very critical point of going from the first 6 to the other 6. And they are by default getting more and more social now, more and more mixing up with other people, with social processes, with the whole universe in a way. When we get to the last one, to Pisces, it's really personality there is not that important anymore. It's in many cases a total merging with the whole, with the total. We start from Libra as reaching out for relationships, for knowing the other and not just ourselves, and somehow adapting, adjusting to these relationships. It's only the first step. And then as we travel to the next ones, Scorpio, Sagittarius, and up to Capricorn, it is a process of teaching ourselves, understanding how to coexist in a relationship environment, let's say. And with all the different interesting things that the two, all of those three signs are leading us through. But from Libra to Capricorn, we have more and more night, or let's say more and more darkness. We can also say more yin and less yang. So again, a switch. And when we reach Capricorn, the longest night now and the shortest day, when we think of night, yin, or receptive energy, or collective energy, it is more to do with personality is becoming subject to collective forces. When the day is more predominant, or the light or the yang is more predominant, then it's the other way around. It is more concentrated in the self, in the some sort of building of or being focused on how the individual will prepare for then participation in some future moment. So I know this whole thing is quite abstract, but looking at the zodiac from this perspective is meaning that at any place on the circle, we have an interplay between two forces, the two main forces of life, around which all traditions, spiritual traditions, esoteric traditions, astrology, anything that you may be studying outside of this, are revolving around the yin and the yang energies of nature. And Rudhyar is saying it will help us a lot if we use that frame of reference, that he goes into very big detail, sign by sign and step by step in his book, The Pulse of Life. That's also available for free on that same website. Then if we use the archaic habits of thinking of zodiac signs as some sort of groups of stars out there that are doing something or are affecting us directly, which actually is not the case. And here you can see that because of the over time, it's always difficult to explain this precession of the equinoxes idea, that if you look at where zero Aries is in the tropical zodiac here, this is not pointing to Aries in the constellations. Some time ago, more than 2,000 years ago, they say, they were overlapping. So where we find the sun in spring was in the same place where these groups of stars called Aries were observed, could be seen as well. Now it's no longer the case, because Aries as an idea is nothing but a function. It is a way of doing something, or it's like it is now the time for this to happen in nature, which when we speak about Aries, for example, that would be the beginning of new life, the germinating of seeds, let's say, or the appearance of vegetation. It is still very nascent. It is still in the beginning of its life, but that's where it happens in Aries. So Aries is some sort of a symbol of beginning. And now we can use the stars, the actual sidereal zodiac constellations, as different agents, different, focal points, where now in our days, when we begin, we will be doing that from the perspective of the constellation of Pisces. And that's how it's been in the last 2,000 years. And we are now moving towards another shift where more and more the vernal equinox will be pointing to Aquarius. And that's what the whole thing about the age of Aquarius is about. It is called the precession of the equinoxes. There is no time enough time today to go into exactly how it's calculated, but the mere fact that these two zodiacs do not coincide is just to illustrate for us that we shouldn't connect the meanings of the signs with something necessarily physical. It is more of a, Rudhyar describes it as the office of the president is called Aries, but then every single president is a different person. And they switch their roles. So maybe we can imagine that the constellations of different presidents that are coming in power to played the role, the function, the institution of Aries. So during the course of time, those very long ages of which we have a very short lifetime, and we cannot experience them all. Now we are in the so-called age of Pisces because Aries hits into the Pisces constellation. Then will come the Aquarius age for 2000 years and more. But over time, longer scale, every single point in this zodiac, in the tropical zodiac, will be activated by every single point in space. And it will be kind of one big rotation. So everything tries its hand. And I think it's when we imagine it, when we see how this is as an illustration, as a reality out there, we can start making associations about the meanings of the stars, especially when we look at this ebb and flow of night and day, yin and yang, that Rudhyar is kind of advising that we translate everything through. So yeah, that's the tropical zodiac, the rhythm of the seasons. And my favorite book by Rudhyar is actually The Pulse of Life. And it is amazing how you can understand from there. It's like a short article about every sign of the zodiac that you can find. And when you read them separately, yeah, you would find lots of interesting things. But if you read them in order, you have the feeling of this gradual process unfolding itself in front of your eyes. How Aries actually is what it is because it follows Pisces and it's before Taurus. And it has this particular place in the system. It is number one. And it's not just numerologically important that it's number one, because astrology is not just a system of numbers, that the first sign, the second sign, the third sign. It is what has been happening before Aries is conditioning its behavior, it's conditioning its temperament. And where it's going is actually trying to reach to achieve something that would bring into Taurus experiences. And then Taurus is kind of taking on the torch, continuing from there, and leading to the next step of the process. And they all need each other. No one of them can exist without the others. So, okay, let's move on. Another quote here. The zodiac is a dynamic, polarized, life-creating activity. The Aries function at one time is focused symbolically or cosmically upon the group of stars named the Ram, or Aries. At another time, upon the constellation of the Fishes. Later, on that of the Water Bearer. The function, the zodiacal sign, is the basic thing. The purpose and the agencies through which it works are in a sense secondary. They are symbolized by the actual star groups or constellations. Oh, that thing that I tried to explain before. I wonder if this is clear for you. If this is more confusing, then is that the way you imagine the zodiac, or is it some sort of different idea for you? Any questions, comments here about this? You can speak.
I have a question. Oh,
Yes.
I was just saying that from what I can tell, what you're saying is that as the two different, the zodiac and the sidereal, the tropical and the sidereal, as time goes on, that there's a misalignment, so to speak, or they're not completely aligned.
Yeah.
And so what he's saying is, when you think about the sign, if you're going to think about Aries, understand that it's going to kind of have a different character. Is that a nice way of saying it, or a different flavor, if you will? As sometimes it's the ram, others the fish, other the water bear. So it'll take on like a certain look, so to speak, depending on where it is. Is that what he's saying?
I think pretty much you're right. The way I mainly understand this whole thing is that, first of all, he's kind of making a case for the tropical zodiac against the sidereal in his way of, thinking about what really affects our life and our, say, the chart in general, because the sidereal is a reflection of reality, physical reality. These groups of stars are out there, they're on the sky, and they are where they are. They don't actually move that much. They move slightly, as a matter of fact, but from our perspective, they are part of this fixed stars background. So if we use them, if we use the sidereal zodiac as a reference point for our, thinking of what the different signs mean and so on, then we would be stuck in a particular frame which is not dynamic, which is not showing a process, but it's showing this way of how most astrologers and most other systems of astrology are very deterministic. Like this causes that. So this planet is making you do something directly, or these groups of stars are sending some sort of mysterious energy, which is quite a naive way to look at it, isn't it? That is affecting us here on Earth. Rudhyar, I think, is saying what is affecting you is the gradual process of change. That because we're here, we live as people on Earth, and we experience the seasons, and we experience this, change of light, change of the length of day, and in the past that was even more important because this was what our life of people depended on. Whether the vegetation is going to grow, whether there will be enough light, whether there will be enough for example, days that are beneficial for agriculture or for something else, or how they adapt to their everyday biological existence. And the seasons are one of the crucial factors. This moving through the year and adapting to change. Sometimes one thing is required from us. At another moment, something completely different. And this is a very good reflection. That's the way I've kind of now got myself into the habit of analyzing the signs in the chart, that Scorpio or Sagittarius that are more towards the end of the cycle, or at least after the first half, they have a particular business to be engaged in. They have tasks to do, and they have these people that have concentration of those energies. They need to concentrate on one step of the process, which is not the same step as a Gemini one or a Taurus one. There will be clashes between them because they have different priorities. And the kind of the base of those priorities, where they come from, is where this sign is located in the cycle, step by step. Is it step 10 or step 2? That matters a lot more than those associations that we can make with animals for the different signs, or mythology. This can help too. I mean, I'm not, by no means I'm saying think of the zodiac only as a process and not as for example, thinking about Taurus, consider what mythology says about the bow and what it's symbolizing in the traditions and so on, because that can give us a lot of very concrete ideas how to explain to your clients actions or ideas of what they can do, or how to explain behavior of people and so on. But this is more additional than the main thing. Yeah. Does it make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, that helps. Thank you. No, it seems that tropical is more of a way to kind of ground, I guess, the zodiac in terms of useful for us and life on Earth. I understand. Thank you.
And some sort of more universal way of looking into it, maybe a bit more modern, because we are supposed to not be very happy anymore to just be given explanations like that of this is causing you to do something magically. This is a god out there, or it made sense in the past and for obvious reasons. But maybe looking at things symbolically, as Rudhyar is repeating many times, astrology being a way of understanding life and a symbolical language, we just need to, I guess, adapt the tools in that way a little bit. So yeah, basically, I would say if you're interested in all this and really grasping it better, what he means by all of that, The Pulse of Life is a great book, a great experience, and can change the perspective of the chart reading a lot. I will move on now.
Just one question, sorry.
Yes, Kate.
You saw the two ellipses. The inner ellipse, the tropical sidereal, goes anti-clockwise, but the outer one goes clockwise. Is there a reason why they are going in different directions? So technically, Logic would assume if he was following tropical zodiac, the sidereal zodiac would be going from Pisces to Aries, Aries to Taurus. But in this case, it's actually going from, we went from Aries to Pisces, and now Pisces generationally into Aquarius. Is there a reason why it is going backwards through the zodiac, traditional zodiac, as opposed to?
There was an explanation for that, which at the moment I don't remember, to be honest. There was something, I think I very vaguely understand it, so I'd rather not explain it because I may be wrong. But there was a point which was about why it's moving. That's why it's called precession and not procession. You know, precession means it's moving backwards. So the point of the equinox is moving backwards in the sidereal rather than forward. And do any of you know what is the astronomical explanation for that? Really don't remember at the moment.
I mean, I guess like the way I look at sidereal zodiac, it's more of a, because it moves so slowly.
Yes.
I would say it's more of a generational kind of imprint. You know, those born on the Piscean, I wouldn't say, oh, you're a Piscean sidereal zodiac, so everything is influenced. I mean, everything's influenced by Piscean way. It's only when we're shifting between signs, it's almost like the 29th degree, the 0 degree, that you really start to say, well, actually, generationally, as a human collective, we are changing our kind of
perspective. Yes, in general, but it's not just generational, it's a lot more than that. It's like we can say global in a much longer time, because these are ages of 2100 or more years. So the switching happens once every approximately 2000 years, and it's not really an exact switch because the constellations don't have a clear beginning and a clear ending. And we can see now the point of Aries in the spring. So this is where we find this whole concept that we're discussing now is so much about us, about humans living on Earth. If we are on another planet, we're going to observe a completely different picture of what is going on the sky. So from here, we can see in the spring that the sun is somewhere. And when we look, where is the sun? We can see that it's very close to those constellations, Pisces and Aquarius at the moment. But the next time this is going to change is going to be a very, very, very long time ago, ago or forward from now. So it's not going to make such a big difference. But look how special times we are born in, because we are born at a time when we can actually clearly feel the switch of major, it's probably cultural or even civilizational, new direction. So the whole tropical zodiac is now going to be animated by another idea when it starts its journey every year. And that for the next 2000 years. And this new idea will be called Aquarius. Maybe we are already there, maybe not exactly. We are in the transition between the two. And it's so interesting, isn't it?
It's like when you're on the cusp of things, you always feel it. It's like anyone progressed planets, when it's just about to change signs, it's the couple of degrees before the very last degree. And then as it enters into new spaces, that window where the energies are charged. So I believe we are in that window, and especially with Saturn and Jupiter, finally forming conjunction, did form conjunction in an air sign where, traditionally it was forming in earth signs.
Yes.
It's almost like the tipping point. And I believe that, this month in particular, with the first equinox coming to fruition, it's like the shining of that new energy entering into space. But what I find interesting is that there's so much discussion about what it means to go from a Piscean age of 2000 years, self-sacrifice, and unconditional love, to Aquarius and the various shake-ups that will have. But then let's not forget, in 2000 years time or 2100 years time, humanity is going to go from Aquarius to Capricorn. And what is that going to look like? We go from breaking down structures and changing the way we do things, having different perspectives, and then we go right back into structure. and setting goals and focus.
Yes, yes, that's such a big topic on its own, and it will be very interesting. I don't remember if you were with us when we spoke about the age of Aquarius. We had a discussion earlier. I think just before the new year it was, and it's on the page. You can all watch it. We looked at that in more detail, and I remember I had a bit of a short snapshot of what the different ages were concentrating on back in history. So the age of, I think we started from Leo, so Leo, Virgo, actually Leo, Cancer, Gemini, and so on up to today, because they go, as you said, they go backwards. It's a big topic. I mean, this is really, the point here is more to, we as astrologers or just enthusiasts or however you are studying astrology, to realize that, first of all, these two zodiacs exist. They are different. They're not the same thing. And we can just, automatically use them interchangeably. We can if we want, but it's important to know in our own head that this is the case. And maybe to make another step into, regardless of all the information out there that is constantly breaking things into pieces and saying, Pisces means this, Aquarius means that, and only taken out of context, to reach out and see the process, the zodiacal seasonal rhythm that always repeats itself, and always at a different level. We have spring every year, we have Aries equinox point, but it's a different life going on every year. The process is the idea. This is what is repeating itself. It's not the substance. So, okay, I will move on because there's a lot more to come. Let's switch to houses now, because this is the comparison we're trying to make between this division of the chart in equal sectors, the zodiac, and we do another division into 12 parts, the houses. And you know that with certain house systems, ways of calculating charts, we have all the 12 sectors like they're shown on this picture. They look pretty much the same. They take the same of the space around the person, or the circle of the chart. In other systems, we have a bit of a deviation going on. So we can see some houses much bigger than others, some sectors of the chart much bigger than others. I will show a few charts in a moment, but this is to illustrate that the houses division is now something completely different. This is really space. This is really physical area around you. So somebody is standing on the surface of the earth, and we literally have the east, the west, their horizon, what they physically see from there, and the south and the north. Maybe here will come the question, this usual question, why is everything upside down? Why east is where west is going to be? I won't go into this too much, but the explanation is in the fact that we are living on the northern hemisphere. And I think people who consider the chart from the other side, this is just the reality of it, that what we see here up, directly vertically up, is the southern part of the globe. Yeah, this part of the sky, which is the southern part of the globe. And what we see down, or we don't see, in fact, down, is the northern part of the globe. But these are, that's not the most important thing here. The point here is to realize that the houses of the chart reflect the reality of how you orient yourself in your space. So if you look slightly more to the east or to the west, your horizon is changing. And you know how the idea of horizon can be used as my horizon, my point of view, my relationship to reality, how I participate in this reality, how I judge this reality. And this is dependent on that. You know that the houses in the chart are areas of experience where things actually happen. These are the spaces, literally, where a certain action unfolds, almost like a scene of a theater, or a ring, a circular ring, where in all the different sectors, something else is going on and a different activity is going on. So this, I thought, will help juxtapose one to the other. Houses, signs of the zodiac, the ring of the zodiac and the ring of the houses. And if you look here, I really love that, because this is, for example, where we can imagine ourselves standing in the center of our world. And then we divide into 12 sectors, like pizza slices, the space around us. So here, 1 to 12, we've got the houses. But then the zodiac ring, this aura around the Earth, imaginary aura, imaginary belt, is not on the same axis. It's not on the same level. They don't exactly overlap. They are slightly at a tilt to each other. So this is how the zodiac runs from the perspective of somebody being, kind of sitting on the surface of the Earth. And this is how the houses are projected. So that next one is another way of showing the same thing. I thought, let's show you two, because maybe it will be easier for some people to figure it out here, for others there. So this is the ring of the zodiac, which is called the ecliptic, the yellow one, the path of the sun during the year. But this one is not running on the equator of the Earth. So we as a planet have our own horizon. Like the Earth horizon is called the equator. And if we extend it even more in space, this becomes the celestial equator. So the celestial equator, this dotted line here, is a continuation of our own equator on Earth. But because the planet is tilted, this doesn't correspond to the zodiac ecliptic circle. And they cross each other in some 2 points, here and here. And these 2 points are the equinoxes. So that's why in early spring and in early fall, we have equal days and equal nights, because our horizon, our equator, our point of view coincides with the line on which the sun is running. Yeah, with the path of the sun, only in these 2 points, these 2 times. And then in all the rest of the time, it is either the day is longer and the night is shorter, or the other way around. Does that make sense? And we are using our equator and our, then the celestial extension of that to project the houses in the chart, to divide the space. But we are using the zodiac wheel to divide it one more time. What is really confusing for us and for most people, for astrologers, is that I will switch to a chart now. This is an example chart. This is the fact that actually the signs are given equal portions. You see how on the outer circle, each one of the zodiac signs is given 30 degrees, 1/12 of the wheel. And this is making us think that what we are, kind of orienting ourselves from is the zodiac. Well, actually, the houses are equal in the chart. But these equal houses, these equal portions of space around us, they take more or less degrees of the zodiac in them. This means that when somebody is standing here in the center, for example, of their own world, the 11th house, you see the 11th house here, is going to cut through the zodiac. I look at the sky and I see on that side, up there, because the 11th house is over the horizon. It's this visible area, part of the visible area. So I look in that direction and I see in that sector a certain part of the zodiac, but I don't necessarily see the whole of one sign. I don't necessarily see what is here, Pisces and Aries we can see around the 11th house. So I'm not necessarily going to see the whole of Pisces or the whole of Aries there. Maybe I'll see a little bit of Pisces and then a little bit of Aries. There'll be a mixture. And then when I go to another section of the space around me, I may observe something else. A lot of, the whole of one sign and a little bit of others. So we're talking about a much bigger portion of the zodiac. So when we go to the chart, we can see this. This person has in the 11th house a bit of Taurus, a bit of Gemini. But then the 9th house includes only Pisces. So in the 9th house, when they look at that portion of the sky, only they can register a bit of Pisces. And this, usually is called an intercepted house. So when a house is entirely only one sign, the house is intercepted. But when one sign is entirely from the first degree to the last degree of that sign in a house, then that's an intercepted sign. Do we have something like this here? Yes, we can say that Aries and Libra are intercepted, and Aries is entirely in the 10th house, while Libra is entirely in the 4th house. So this is an argument for those house systems that use the division of space around you as a reference point. That's why we are resulting into this more chaotically looking chart where not everything is very balanced, not every sign covers one house. Maybe this is a bit annoying for a lot of astrologers because it's just easier if it's another way around. Let's just juxtapose them, pretend that the houses and the signs are the same thing and they're running along the same lines. Oh, actually, what we just saw, I hope, is that maybe it's better if we pay homage to the reality. And that is going to give us possibly a more real, a more truthful perspective of what this person is really experiencing. Because in fact, this person, on wherever they were born on the face of the earth, in their 9th house, is concentrating on Pisces. The experiences that are happening in the 9th house of their life are going to be colored by the qualities of this sign. And if we order the chart using another system of calculation where everything is equalized, then maybe we're not going to be reaching the conclusions of what is very specific for that person. But we are going to be kind of treating them as one of many, as one of all of the other people that were under the effect of the same zodiac, split in the same way, in the same, almost like we are all the same regardless of where we are on the earth, because we consider ourselves as the earth, this a community, and it's the same influence for everybody. Well, this idea here is that humanistic, person-centered, that's why it's called person-centered astrology, says, well, actually, the chart is supposed to be created by the circumstances of that individual, their location, their time of birth. Well, from that we can see what they really see at that moment. And then the state of the solar system, the positions of all the planets, how they would affect them will be specific, very, very specific. So, okay, then I wanted to give you this quote before we move to part 2, the next step in the book. And I'll probably also give you a quick break because it's so much and too much talking and so on. So we can maybe have a 5-minute break. But here is this quote I wanted to mention. Self-development is based on the power constantly to reorient oneself in space, literally to find a new orient. Reorientation in this deeper sense means to see the self, the ascendant or eastern horizon, from a new point of view in space. Man moves thus from house to house, and as he does so, he sees himself and the other world, descendant, differently. So we are the only ones, as a difference to the animals, for example, or the plant life, that can change location. We talked a bit about this last time. What happens if we calculate the chart based on a new location where the person moved, not where they were born necessarily? And so many things can come up of these experiments, new revelations, because your perspective really changes. You see a different sky. And symbolically, this is meant to mean something and not to be like totally disregarded. Okay, any questions before the break?
And just on this point of view, like one thing I was about tropical astrology is that in general it works fine until you get to the extremes. So the further north and the further south.
That's right.
Someone born in Greenland, you're looking at their chart and you're like, I'm sorry, predominantly your chart is so skewed in certain areas. And you might say, well, that's your life journey. But I don't know, I just feel like, and also when people move for their solar returns, it's like, I'm going to skip my Saturn ascendant this year by moving to geographically. If you think about it from the origin of humankind, whilst we're always being nomadic to an extent, we were never able to to travel to such an extent that you would be able to geographically elude
Yes.
your solar return kind of prediction. So you'd have to go through, you can't just ignore, and it goes back to what you said at the beginning about, you know, considering planets in a holistic way as opposed to separately. You know, Saturn has this important role in relation to the rest of the planets. And when people go, oh yeah, I'm going to move to Barcelona this year, or I'm going to be in Barcelona on the day of my solar return in order to get a better forecast for the year. It doesn't.
Well, first of all, what is a better and worse forecast? That's very arguable.
Yes, exactly. I mean,
and the other thing is, it's not about the solar returns. It's about, this is a completely new, I mean, completely different topic on its own, but it's the actual chart, like the birth chart to be relocated. Some people do that. You know, it's not the relocation as in astrocartography, which you may know about. It's the experiment of what would have been the case if I was born in London and not in Bulgaria, for example, because let's say I moved when I was in my 20s and I spent most of my life there. So maybe I would say, okay, how did my orientation change? And do I really need to change the chart, or am I still my same chart, the one I was born in? These are all very philosophical questions. There's no answer to that, actually. But I want to answer something else you mentioned. Why, when you are north and south, the chart gets very skewed? So you get very small houses and very large houses. And is that not imbalanced? Is that not kind of depriving us from some experiences as opposed to others? I have a chart with a big concentration of planets in one sign and one house. Can I turn around and say to the universe, that's not fair? Why have I got something in one place so much and many other areas are empty? You know, the question of empty houses, for example, or empty signs. Well, maybe the answer is that my journey was showing through the chart a symbol of concentration of energy in particular fields. So in my case, it's to do more with a sign, say a lot of planets in Scorpio. So that will deprive me from being very active, very experienced in many other things. But that is probably the point for me to understand that I need to concentrate on something. That this, my particular case, is a case of concentration. While another person born with a more spread out chart, with all sorts of things in different houses, different signs, their purpose is different. So the same can be called true with the location.
oh, absolutely. But then if you think about it, right, for example, I have a cluster of planets in the fifth and sixth and seventh. Now that is in the stellium because there's two in each. However, should the borders of each house change to an extent based geographically to the point where now that fifth and sixth is now, let's say the fifth, now that becomes a stellium, because even though it's like out of sign, they're two different signs, it's still within the same house. I just feel like when we talk about polarization of energy, I guess my point was that there was a traditional base of astrology, and we talked about the seasons earlier. Technically, we are changing the seasons because of global warming. If you notice, the trees are pollinating a lot earlier, so spring technically is arriving a little bit before what it was traditionally, and it will continue to do so, no doubt, or it has.
That's not the point. We are not looking at the vegetation or the nature to determine where is zero Aries. This is just a symbolical comparison of a gradual process of growing in nature. The actual calculation is made by the equalness of the date and the night astronomically. So maybe this year, when this happens and we have equal day and equal night, we have snow outside and there is still nothing growing and nothing happening.
Yeah.
Then 10 years later, due to, if we presume that global warming is a factor over the course of, say, several decades, yeah, we're going to see a different picture. But this Rudhyar is making
change the system. That's what I'm saying, because tropical astrology is basically changing the system based on what we know as modern humans, effectively. You know, geographic location, the spin, etc., etc. What traditional astrology was based on what they could observe. Well, it was a system based on its time that's still used today. But should we then, like, you know, the observance of a 13th constellation, the changing Aries is meant to initiate the spring, right? We know when Aries should be coming into play, like on a degree basis. But given that the actual spring seems to be occurring before that actual point, should we then change our astrological, the way that we conduct astrology?
Kate, I think the whole confusion comes from looking for a physical thing to base this whole thing on, whatever that physical thing may be, whether it's the point of Aries, whether it's some sort of star, or what is really the meaning, the way I understand it, from Rudhyar's perspective about the tropical zodiac of seasons. It's the experience of change of this, just the position of two forces. One is always bigger than the other, and they are always in a certain relationship of how much of one and how much of the other. So at one point you've got 30% of one, 70% of the other. Then the situation changes gradually. You know, they shift focus during the process. If we want, we can start from Capricorn. We don't have to start from Aries. We can start from anywhere. We can pick our point. The reason why we have picked in Western astrology and in this kind of method of working nowadays, Aries, is because Aries by association, because of what we observe out there in nature, kind of makes the most sense to be the starting point. And also, you know, some people arguably will say, is it not more logical to start from the point when the light is born, which is zero Capricorn? At zero Capricorn, we've got total darkness. And for the first time, the light starts emerging. So some people may say, is that not a better symbol of a new life and a new beginning, even though we still don't see anything? It's like seeds being planted that are still to come out. Other people say, no, it makes more sense to be Aries. So there is like a bit of a consensus here among people to use that as a reference point. But this is by no means related to something physical out there. Yeah, it is about the process. It's not about the physical reality. It is the using the zodiac as a symbol of growing up and then dying and then growing and being born again and then going through different stages, dying again, starting again. You see what I mean? It's not the moment we start to connect it with something physical, then we are getting deterministic because we are escaping from the idea of process and we are getting back to the idea of what explains what. So this physical reality is very similar to the other physical reality. So let's join them together.
No, but at the same token, like people use astrology for farming, you know, the moon cycles, you know, the seasons by their very essence, they connected to the zodiac. Like there was actual real physical tangible
absolutely use. Yes, you're right. You're absolutely right. And this is for the purpose of that. For the purpose of that, that's great and it works. But what we are trying to do is look more from a psychological perspective. So the use of astrology for other things, you know, together, hand in hand with the old things, because the old things are pretty much not necessary that much anymore in the current age. They have been solved in different other ways, and they have been somehow overcome because now you can plant, crops in winter. You can do, due to, you know, new developments, you can not necessarily be subject to the cycles in nature as much as we were in the past, but still they're very useful and they're valid. And traditional astrology is very valid as well. But the point is, what are we trying to do with this? And if we're trying to help people in a consulting situation, for example, to analyze somebody's chart, what they're going through, what they're, you know, experiencing, and what their character is about, for example, whatever, this is now needing another tool. That's basically it. If you see what I mean.
Yeah, I think my overall point was just to what extent should we supplant the traditional with these more modern
exactly.
It's wonderful to be able to talk about it. That's all I wanted to say, really. But thank you.
Yeah, last time because we kind of had a bit of a foundation about this overall philosophical base of why and what's the point of going into this direction of holism and not something else, without saying that the other methods are not valid. And Rudhyar, for example, is making it very clear that this is not a point of one technique against another technique, as usually astrologers are arguing around these things. So shall I use this? Does this planet mean that or the other? And how to calculate it exactly, or how to things, which are the details, which are the technicalities. But very often we don't really think about, so what? Why is it important to be one or the other? What are we going to achieve with this, and how are we going to be helpful? So let's do a quick break, 5 minutes, and we'll Okay, now we continue with step 5. In the book, it's step 5, which is called the use of the lights. So yeah, now we're going to touch more on what you Kate kind of maybe anticipated a little bit. The sun and the moon as the two lights, which probably the most important thing here that I want to say is that they are special in a way. They're not like the rest of the planets. And we are very used to, especially if you're an astrologer, you have your book of ephemeris or tables online or whatever. And when you want to check the positions of something, the moon and the sun are listed in the same table along with all the rest of the planets, and everything is made in a way that you would say, okay, they're part of it. And they are called planets very often. We refer to them as one of the others, as one of the group. But not many people realize how special they are and how they are involved in a dynamic, one to the other, that is forming the basis of the whole astrological blueprint of the person or the situation, and maybe constitutes 90% of the whole story. And what goes after that or along with that to the planets is more of a reflection of details and of sections that are getting more specialized from then on. But life itself and personality, existence as such, requires mostly those two factors that are always engaged in a game together, in a cyclic interrelationship, the sun and the moon. And this is what people were able to observe. What I read in Rudhyar's book, which was something very strange and new to me, and hadn't really thought it was very interesting, is that there was a time, long, long time ago, when the sunlight wasn't visible, the sun's disk wasn't directly visible from Earth. There were those clouds engulfing the Earth, between the Earth and the moon, that were kind of, it was dark. It was a bit of a light going sipping through, but it wasn't that direct. So people living on the surface weren't able to see the disks of the sun and the moon and to observe this constant tide of, the increases and the decreases, the ebbs and flows and the different phases that the moon appears to have as it's changing its relationship to the sun. The lunar cycle, the solar cycle, is actually that interplay. We're not just seeing the moon changing. It is the relationship between the sun and the moon, how the sun is lighting, from a different angle during the month, the moon. But when we think of the sun and the moon as two factors in the chart, in the personality, they really are the main duality, the main pair. But this sort of duality is not two things of totally different quality existing together and doing different things and providing some sort of opposition. They are in a dynamic, constant relationship to each other. And we can also connect them literally to the yang and the yin force, the external conscious participation energy on which we run. Very often the sun is connected to some sort of a fuel that we all run in, and the life substance that is needed to give something to the moon, figuratively speaking, symbolically speaking, and then the moon is turning that into life, into physical reality. Rudhyar is saying that after some time, around the time when they say the Atlantean age was, the clouds around the Earth dispersed, and this so-called sublunar realm was cleared, and people were. This is when the process of ancient astrology and all the myths and all the images that were created in our conscious and unconscious related to what does the sun do and what does the moon do and what their roles are as lights started to form itself. And it's good for us to know the history of all this, that first of all, this wasn't the case all the time. Then something changed at some point, and then this has been going on for such a long time that in our collective unconscious, we automatically associate these two lights with certain forces out there, physical forces that we imagine are acting on us. The light of the sun is very direct, very bright and easily visible, so almost blinding most of the time. While the light of the moon is delicate, it's soft, it's mysterious. So people were assuming different qualities and different personal then temperaments related to what they actually see. The stability of the sun, which is associated with the stability of the consciousness and the direction, the purpose that everybody holds, more or less strongly as an instinct, against the constant changing feelings, moods, internal balance of the lunar realm. The conscious against the unconscious also could be juxtaposed. So the idea of the sun being actually the main force, the life-giving force, the one that's determining what potentially could be born and develop later. The moon, the agent that's making that happen. Without that, the sun is heat and light, but that's not life. That's not enough to create life on Earth. The lunar moisture, feelings, what the body is made of is mostly water, seawater. This is connected to the symbology of this moisture of the moon being needed as a substance, as a kind of a crucible into which, combined with the solar energy, something can get born. So the main parts of the personality are considered to be the sun and the moon that form our instincts, reactions to what goes on around, and make us move about in space and kind of be a separate entity. Individuality formed on the level of the sun over time. It is by no means that from the beginning, which is why people usually get to know their sun signs over time and they don't necessarily know how to operate with it from the start. It's a learning process. While the moon is this automatic adaptation, the ability to adapt to everything that affects us, and to then produce feelings and emotional reactions. There is a lot more than that, but if we think of them as separate, they as involved in something that's determining the overall pattern of the chart and of the system, more than, of a different kind than the rest of the planets. The sun is the sun, the one around which everything rotates, the one that activates everything else. It is not really a planet, one of the planets. The moon is a satellite of the Earth. It is directly related to us, the Earth. Maybe the role that our moon plays is played in some way by the two moons of Mars. If you live on Mars, you would be subject to the way the solar rays are being reflected by two moons, the ones that exist on Mars. Well, here on Earth, this is our regulator. This is our, maker or breaker of life. And it is very interesting then to stress on. Actually, I have two quotes about the sun and the moon before we go to the lunation cycle. So the sun is fuel on which we operate, for example. The sun represents the self, the purpose, and the will of a person, but only in their latent or undifferentiated state, as spiritual potential and virgin substance energy. Actual performance will come as this substance energy is captured and transformed into a simple oscillatory activity with waxing and waning phases, or into still more complex type of group operation. The first alternative refers to the moon, the second to the combined cycles of all the planets in the solar system. So in my mind, it is something like the sun plays two parallel games. One is with the moon. The other one is with all the planets and their arrangement at any moment. And we're going to see how these two things are making, they are of different order, and they are creating a different dynamic in the chart and in us. A little bit about the moon. The feelings are psychological expressions of biological instincts, which in truth are waves and eddies in the tidal flow of the lunar forces, acting upon the moisture in man's body and psyche. This tidal flow is represented in astrology by the lunation cycle and the phases of the moon. These phases are not to be understood as changes in the moon herself as a celestial globe, but as changes in the relationship of the moon to the sun. And here is an example model of the lunation cycle. And what we need to add here is that it's not just the moon to the sun to the moon. There is a third player, the Earth. So there are actually three of them. What we see from here as these changes, phases of the moon, is from our perspective. The Earth has to be a factor. The moon is located somehow. For example, here in the new moon, we've got the moon between the Earth and the sun. So that's what's making it a new moon. We don't see it. It's totally blinded because we on the Earth are so blinded by the light of the sun that this is hiding the moon from our view. And symbolically, this has been accepted to be the beginning of the process, the beginning of, we can associate it with Aries a little bit in the same way as we did with the beginning of spring and the zodiac cycle. Again, here, something is starting, something of a circulatory cyclic nature. Then it's going through steps, and something different happens during those steps, a gradual process of unfoldment of something. And we can imagine it in this way. On the new moon, the sun is giving a new impulse to the moon. We can say a new idea, a new initiative, a new way, a new perspective, a new type of energy in one way or another. And every month, this is happening in a different sign of the zodiac and in a different degree of the zodiac. So we can make a note. For me, mostly thanks to the writings of Rudhyar and what I've discovered through the book, The Lunation Cycle, which is one of the main books he wrote, I'm always following the new moon before birth, which is, what was the new moon? Where was the new moon that last happened before somebody was born? And I always, when connecting that also to the Sabian symbols, because that new moon happened on one of the degrees of the zodiac sign. Say, for example, my new moon before birth happened on the 29th degree of Libra. So to illustrate this, every one of us is born somewhere along this cycle. It's some of the steps of that cycle. And we can find out which one by looking into our chart and registering where is the moon, where is the sun, in what angle are they to one another, in what relationship are they. But when I say angle, I don't mean only is it 90 degrees, is it 30 degrees? It's at what stage of after the new moon or before the next new moon. So for example, if you have sun in Libra, moon in Sagittarius, this is telling us that before the moon was in Sagittarius, it was in the past, some little bit before, maybe several days before, it was in Libra, where the sun is. So we can assume from that very soon before this person was born, with the sun in Libra, moon in Sagittarius, there was a new moon in Libra, for example, most likely. And we can check it in the calendar and see when it happened, in what day, how many days before birth. This is determining the phase of the moon under which this person is born, which is a totally another, let's say, branch of astrology that is so disregarded, and not appreciated and not used as much as I think it's supposed to be used. And that is probably one of the greatest contributions of humanistic astrology and Rudhyar, that he brings our attention to the lunation cycle big time, and is then connecting the whole steps of, we're having the sun and the moon here as the ones that are relating to one another, but we can use that as a prototype of any other two planets. And then they assume the role of the sun and the moon, just in our imagination when we follow their cycle together. If it is Jupiter and Saturn, for example, then the question is, which one is the sun and which one is the moon in our mock lunation cycle between them? the sun will be always the slower planet, the one that kind of remains in the same place while the other one is moving around it because the other one is faster. The same way as the moon is faster. So the moon is the one that's traveling on the sky, and we can see how it changes location against the sun, which appears more or less in the same place. So this cycle is very crucial for understanding the actual phase of the moon you were born in. Has no less of meaning than the signs of the zodiac that are represented in your chart, or the houses, which house is a full, which are not. This has a total new kind of level of understanding that can be introduced. So I'll go back to the new moon before birth. It is important because something started, this particular lunar cycle, this particular month, was a kind of a situation on its own. And I was born, or you were born, during that process. And it is putting some sort of a stamp on you symbolically. At what step of the process you were born? Was it right in the beginning when the whole thing was just beginning and was just getting born and wasn't really clear what's going on, the new moon? Or were you born in the first quarter when there is a battle going on? Something is, two forces are fighting against each other. Or in other words, the moon, having taken the new impulse from the sun, has reached the first crucial turning point, the first square, or we can say the first quarter moon, where now it needs to implement it in the world. It needs to assert it. It needs to fight for it. Say what it thinks or do something. We need to study the stages in more detail to understand what they mean, and I don't have the time today for that. But maybe one time we can concentrate only on the lunation cycle and discover how those different steps really affect us, and they reflect, into a completely different perspective to life of that person. Think about it. What stage were you born at? And one way I associate these steps, these 8 phases, to make it easier. And this is an idea by Stephen Forrest in his book, The Book of the Moon. He connects the phases to decades of life, say from 0 to 10 years old, from 10 years old to 20, 30s, 40s, 50s, and so on. And that would mean, this is just one, let's say, easy way to grasp the idea. New moon is early childhood. Then first waxing crescent is from 10 to 20. 20s, you see how much of associations we can make between what happens in life during the 20s. The initial steps of self-assertion, where you fight with your parents, you fight with your peers, you try to figure out what you believe in, or you try to prove yourself in a job, in education, in something else. You try to orient yourself. You feel like you know something, or you have an intuition of where you're going, but you're not haven't yet been active with it. First quarter, this is very, very similar as symbology. It's what happens as a first square between 2 planets as well. That's why it's important whether 2 planets are at their first square or they're at their last square. These are totally different stages of life. It is almost like comparing the 20s with the the 50s or the 60s. So it's very different. And the lunation cycle is a model that, if we get used to that model, it really, when then you look at the chart, you see that, oh, this person's Jupiter and Mars, they are, say, in a trine, but is that a trine in the beginning of their cycle together or more towards the end of it? That's going to change the meaning. And it is in another session, we're going to look at aspects, and we'll come back to this and understand it hopefully in more detail, and see how we can try to look at aspects as phases of that same imaginary relationship between 2 factors. But finally, here, it's an ebb and flow. So this relationship is of a kind of the sun and the moon being in a different state to one another. So the moon is kind of feeling differently, in a different mood or in a different mode of operation, depending on where it stands in accordance to the sun. It is different with the planets. The planets are another reality. Here we've got to...
Madalena?
Yes?
I'm sorry, I have a quick question. So I'm seeing the correlation between the new moon or the prenatal new moon kind of being the start of something. What if someone is actually born on a new moon? Would
I
you
have
just take that
friends.
as it is, or? Hmm?
Yes, I have a friend. This is a very rare scenario for someone to be born exactly on the minute of the new moon. And let's say we can imagine it as the sun and the moon are on the same degree of the zodiac at that moment of birth. It is very unusual. They would be considered to be born on a new moon. And when you determine their so-called prenatal new moon, this is going to simply be the same degree on which the event has happened, because they are coming here together with the beginning of the event. But usually, when you see that someone is born on a new moon, it's either the end of the cycle or the beginning of the cycle. And then you need to simply check the degrees. If the sun is at 3 degrees Sagittarius and the moon is at 5 degrees Sagittarius, that means that the new moon already happened. So that's the first stage, the beginning. But if the sun is at 3 Sagittarius, the moon is at 1 Sagittarius, that's not a new moon. That's a balsamic moon still. I mean, it is technically a new moon, but it is the end of the cycle, of the previous cycle, not the beginning of the new one. Does that make sense?
Yes, I understand. So unless it's necessarily on the exact degree, then it's probably going to fall one or the other.
Mm-hmm.
And then if it is on the exact degree, you would look at the previous new moon.
Ah, I see what you're saying now. No, I don't think so. I think if it's on the exact degree of the new moon, somebody was born on the exact degree of the new moon, this is their prenatal new moon, that degree, because they're literally appearing here at the start of this cycle. They have nothing to do with the previous, because the previous has already ended. And we know that it's already ended because now the sun and the moon, factually, when we check the tables, the calculations, we can see that they are in the same degree. So the new cycle has begun and they belong to that month, to the new month. But if it is Sagittarius 3, the sun, Sagittarius 1, the moon, then the last new moon before their birth will be somewhere in Scorpio. Does that make sense? So the previous month, the previous moon, and probably will end up somewhere in Scorpio in the previous sign. Here we have always two options for new moon before birth. It is either in the same sign as the sun or in the one before. These are the options, and that usually depends on what stage of the moon cycle we happen to be at. I was born 2 days after a new moon, and that means that. But it's another strange scenario, and I'm mentioning it here because it is yet a third thing from what you asked and what I told you is a usual scenario. So my sun is at 0 Scorpio, and that happens to have been at the time 2 days after the new moon, and obviously 2 days after the new moon means that the sun would not be in Scorpio 2 days before, because on my date of birth it was at 0 Scorpio. One day before, it must have been 29 Libra. The day before, 28 Libra, because the sun moves 1 degree per day. So the new moon before birth was at 28 Libra. Does that make sense? Because a new moon actually happened 2 days before I was born. But because the sun also switched signs in that same period, we have as a result a different new moon from the sun. Am I confusing you?
No, yes, that makes sense because it had moved out of that sign. So I
Exactly.
understand.
Exactly. Yeah. Sometimes it happens like that. Even though the new moon was very recent, it wasn't very far away in time. It was very recent, but still it happened in another sign, not the one that the sun is. So every case is different. Check your case. Check the Sabian symbol of your new moon before birth, and because this symbolically is the new impulse that of this whole month during which you were born, and I find it for everyone I know that I've checked the symbol of the new moon before birth, this somehow resonated with their situation, with their main kind of task in life or something very key to them. that they are wanting or not getting involved in. So it's a fascinating field to explore, because it is based at the end of the day on the two main forces that make us, the sun and the moon, the lights that are the governors of the whole main picture. So look, here we have two charts, just example charts. One of them, some of you may recognize. I don't know if you did already. So they're just for the sake of example. Dwayne is laughing. Which one is yours, Dwayne? Tell everybody else. Yeah, you're muted, but I will tell you. So the first one is Dwayne's chart. Yeah, I just like the way it looks. So I'm using it as an example. I hope you don't mind. The other one is somebody you guys don't know, so it doesn't really matter. But the reason why I wanted two charts, one to the other, is because Rudhyar is also proposing to us to look at the relationship of the sun and the moon in the chart in accordance to the horizon, or to the ascendant descendant line. And he's saying our purpose in life, the sun, our direction, our general kind of energetic goal towards we are somehow projecting out, is either found below the horizon or over the horizon, obviously. And this is determining, is this going to be something of my personal business that I want to project out? So a very personally centered sun, if the sun is underneath the horizon, or is it the other way around? My purpose is conditioned by social things, by society, by forces, by collective, ideals, whatever it may be. This is in the case when the sun is over the horizon. So we have four scenarios. Both of them can be underneath. In my chart, they are both underneath the horizon. So this may be something very introverted. The purpose and the way I get to the purpose and the way I realize it and I participate with the moon, they are all very inside. They're all very behind the scenes in a way. They are more conditioned by my own opinions, my own feelings, my own, kind of worldview. And they're not that conditioned by outside forces, by society or the tradition, let's say. Or you can imagine other things. In general, whatever goes on up there on the upper part of the chart. Well, we can see Dwayne has sun over the horizon and moon over the horizon. So both of them are up. You must be a very, very social animal, Dwayne. Like everything is concentrated towards achieving something, maybe leaving a legacy, or using things that are already there in the culture, transforming them, reanalyzing them, and again giving them to the culture. So it's all about interaction with the world, this phase. Well, for other people, we have duality of purpose and participation. So the sun is on one side, the moon is on the other side. If the sun is up, they want to, they're inspired by the world or by something out there, but they realize it, they kind of apply the patterns of the world in their personal life. Moon is underneath the horizon. So they are conditioned by what they learn, how they interact, and what sort of dramas they get into with other people, with society. And this affects their inner life, the moon, that's underneath the horizon. Or the final option is the moon to be up, the sun to be down. And in that case, the sun down is motivated by its own personality, its own purpose, and some sort of more individualistic direction, maybe a bit rebellious, maybe a bit out of the ordinary or out of the social norm. And then it is trying to affect the norm through the moon, like the moon is like an instrument, by kind of giving ideas from itself. These are the kinds of people that are some sort of inventors or pioneers or people that demonstrate a new quality in one way or another. So you can imagine things here and kind of develop this idea further. But that's quite rare to pay attention to this. Where in the chart just the lights are, and kind of designate them for a moment from the rest of the the players in the chart and just see where the two main life forces are acting. Yeah. Okay.
I was going to ask you if you could just say, I have both the sun and the moon below the horizon and what that would mean.
Even I'm not totally sure yet. Mine are the same, like yours, Lauren. Mine are also underneath. But what Rudhyar is very, very briefly in the practice of astrology, there are literally 3-4 lines of explanation about each one of the 4 cases. So I think here we can develop that further. I think this may mean that we are more individualistically inclined, that our personal world is not that easily affected by trends, currents, and kind of very much more likely to follow an individual path and to not, maybe that would be a problem at some point because it will need to assert itself. It assumes a bit more introversion, but I don't think it's necessarily introversion in the sense that the person is not social. It's more that the ability to reason for yourself, to feel for yourself, to develop your own qualities of reactions to the world. And both of these things stem from the same place. Both the purpose, the sun, the idea, the impulse, and the individuality, and the way you act with it, the way you make something from it, the moon. So these could be artists, creators, people that give from themselves out, and they're not that fussed about the result. They're very kind of they don't care to change the world necessarily. They feel like they're changing the world by simply being, by simply giving themselves out in a way, and doing some sort of self-realization, service maybe, or creative realization or something like that. Do you feel like that may be true?
Well, that I certainly relate to that. So thank you for covering that.
You're welcome. All right, we are at the 6th final step now, but I suggest another quick break before we go on, because the most information is about the planets and the solar system, and again, another way of how to see them as a whole and so on, which we have been actually repeating for all of those 3 things. 5 minutes and I'll be back to you. So here we've got step 6 in the practice of astrology, the study of the planetary system as a whole. Now we're going to be talking about the planets more and where they belong in this scheme of things. That, again, this is so recent that we are able to have a picture of the solar system and to see how we can try to understand what they mean, all of those very different from one another planets. And if there is any order and logic that we can discern behind, their sizes, their orbital periods, their location one to another, and so on, this is holding a lot of keys. And if we have this picture of the solar system in our minds, sometimes we can even reveal new things for ourselves as meanings. Last week I was thinking about something like that, and I shared with Dwayne as well. I think I realized something new for myself about Chiron, and the whole idea stemmed from, at one point I remembered in a way, that in the solar system we have 4 gas giants, these 4 planets, the large ones, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune, and different things related to their cycles and interrelationship between one another brought me to Chiron, which is located right in the middle of their sequence, somewhere between Saturn and Uranus. And I won't say what this was about, but I found out new information for myself and new associations that I think will be very, very purposeful for the future for me, because I was able to imagine where Chiron is in this whole scheme of things. So now let's see why it's maybe. I'm always very excited about that, because when I first learned about this from Rudhyar, it was a totally new perspective of viewing the system and the planets and their meaning and so on. Looking at several orders, but first, a quote: "The planet as pattern makers. The sun represents the purpose of a life, but every effective purpose is conditioned by a plan of operation. The purpose determines the plan, yet the purpose is also conditioned by the actual possibility there is of making a workable plan to realize this purpose. Much as musical tones are conditioned by the limitations of the instruments. The planets, considered as a group, constitute the workable plan and as well those agencies which oversee its workings. So, coming back to the solar system, the way I understood the message here was that the sun is really the only force which is acting, which is giving out energy or some sort of effect are projected out, and then it is being differentiated, transferred. We can imagine it some sort of divided into different functions through the planets, and the planets themselves don't actually do anything, but their location where they are in the order assume what will be their differentiated function, like the office of this, the office of that. But actually the power for the action is coming always from the sun. And I didn't know that before. I mean, this basically never having thought about it, but it's a good reminder that the sun is a special agent. When we look at it in the chart, always relate how the rest of the planets are relating to the sun first and foremost, and then their interrelationships. So here we've got another kind of subdivision of functions. You know that in astrology, the planets stand for the actual things we do. Mars, our physical actions and assertion, and many, many other things. Venus, the value system, and so on. It's not the point now to give them descriptions, but to see the pattern. At any moment, we have a new pattern on the sky, a new arrangement. And the musical associations abound in Rudhyar's work because he was a composer, a musician. He connected a lot of musical theory with astrological theory, and it's so fascinating how the two things overlap, and one can be used for illustration of the other. And he's saying the sun is giving the main tone of the instrument or the piece, while the planets are some sort of overtones that resonate from the main tone, and then they kind of reflect the solar energy. So somebody with Mars in Gemini and another person with Mars in Gemini, for the sake of example, say they are in the same degree of the zodiac, but with different suns, and of course with different all other planets as an arrangement, will automatically mean that this Mars has to be analyzed and so the meaning of in a completely different way. None of these planets is able to be an agent by itself separately. They're part of something that is interconnecting them, mainly to the sun, but then also for every one of them, it's important where are the rest of them in that particular moment. And everything in the universe is constantly changing, it's constantly rotating. And this gives the uniqueness of the birth chart, like a snapshot of the moment of where everything was. Let's take a look quickly here. We have the sun, then the first planet after that, the small Mercury, the closest one, then Venus. These two are between us and the sun, between the Earth and the sun, why they're called the inner planets. And we are associating their functions with inner things, with inner qualities, mental or emotional, or to do with values or aesthetic decisions, whatever. They are personal things because they are connectors in a way between us and the sun. And they constitute the inner, something of the inner life of the personality. If we always associate the so-called personality, us, whatever, the subject to the earth, because everything is, again, geocentric. We see this universe according to us. So Venus and Mars will be something to do with personal processes. Then Mars is the first one out. So that's part of why it is the force of external action and self-assertion, will, and so on, because that's the first body that is bringing out from the sun out whatever we have formed as personality with Venus and Mercury. And this little, recently formed personality is now going out in the world and trying to assert itself, maybe fight with others like it, and so on. Then there is the asteroid belt. We spoke about the asteroids recently. There was a talk about the 4 main ones, if you remember, and how they can be special. It's special that they are located exactly between Mars and Jupiter. So this already tells us something about what they may mean. That they are some sort of a transition area between the personal planets up to Saturn, up to Mars, and another world that we enter with Jupiter. Jupiter and Saturn are very often considered as a pair of the so-called social planets. And then now Mars is not just going out and interacting and fighting some sort of battle, but it's also mixing up in the asteroid belt. Maybe it's overcoming some results of the past, if we assume that the asteroid belt is some sort of remnants of a planet that existed in the past, or small bits and pieces, residue, something going on there that's not really planets, but it's a barrier in one way or another. We can see it visually here. And Mars is overcoming that, or it's cooperating with these pieces. And then it's able to go to Jupiter, the expansion, connection, now a much broader territory, social action, participation, and so on. And then this is so outgoing and so kind of a force of outward direction that it needs to be stopped somewhere. It needs to be limited somewhere, coming to the role of Saturn, and so on. So we're going to look at them individually in a moment and as groups, but a lot of the meanings are revolving around the symbol of the position and where it is in the whole scheme of things. With Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, just very quickly mentioning that, again, we have another category of planets that are significators of something that's not really belonging to the solar system up to Saturn, and are introducing us into the area of transition between the overall galaxy and our solar system. If we think holistically, we're always reminded of this idea of small holes being part of bigger holes, which Rudhyar's work constantly revolves around in many different, saying the same thing in many different ways. Here we've got our solar system is a whole, it's made of parts, as we can see, different planets, different bodies, but it is possibly and likely part of a bigger whole, the galactic whole. And then there it is playing the role of only one of the planets plays in its own inner structure. Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto are called by Rudhyar the aura, or the ambassadors of the galaxy to the solar system, the way we know it, up to the limits of Saturn. And they are integrating foreign elements, things that are not necessarily part of the ordinary Saturnian ordered everyday existence and tradition, but they are shockers and transformers in one way or another, the so-called transpersonal planets. So now, let's, I don't know if I already showed you this one, but this analogy is, I think, something very beautiful to associate planets with the sun and with the functions, how it all works. And Rudhyar is suggesting we imagine a prism. Yes, Simona? Did you want to say something?
Sorry.
Yes?
Mentioned Chiron, and that's not chart.
You are breaking up a little bit, but I heard that you mentioned Chiron. So is it the question why it's not on the graphic? Well, Chiron is not a planet. Here we're looking at the planets of the solar system. And, as we know them so far, maybe they'll discover another one this century, who knows? But for the moment, we've got these planets. And Chiron is, I think, a comet, if I'm not mistaken, astronomically, or a body which is, well, some say it's an asteroid, but it's not an asteroid of the asteroid belt here between Mars and Jupiter. That's a different territory altogether. But Chiron is between Saturn and Uranus. here somewhere. Yeah. And it is the newest big factor in the chart and in astrology as a body that we observe and we follow and see how it affects the charts and so on. And it's, I would admit, this is the most interesting thing for me recently. It was discovered only in 1977, so it's pretty new. It's not new, but we didn't know about it until then. I suppose I would use another time, another discussion when we have more time, to tell you what I think about Chiron and what I recently discovered about it. But I think it plays a much bigger role than we imagine. Yes, Lauren.
I wanted to ask a question. Of course, because you mentioned the musical
Yes.
idea, I have a question on that.
Yeah.
In Dane Rudhyar's work, did he include the earth as one of the tones?
I don't think so in this particular context, because it is the thing on which everything is acting on. So it's like the earth is the one that's listening to the music.
And the other question is, could you name the resource or that he talked about, the scale and the planets?
This thing about tones and overtones is mentioned in the practice of astrology in this step 6. If you read, the article about step 6, but I'm sure there is a book that goes much more into detail. Was it the? So it's not it's not a purely astrological one. I'm just trying to remember the title. Dwayne, do you know it? Was it the rhythm of tone or something like this?
I think it's the art. Yeah, the art of tone. And
thank you. Okay, I don't want to interrupt your presentation.
No, don't worry. That's a good question. I also want to read about this more, because I'm like a very amateur musician, and I really wanted to see those associations between the forces. We have 7 planets up to Saturn and 7 in the scale. So for people that are into music, it's very obvious how the system repeats itself as a symbol in many of those things. So okay, let's go on, and we can come back to something. There are other associations that can be made, but I wanted to show you the prism one. I think this is very accurate as a way of looking into it, as long as we don't try to necessarily attach one color to one planet, because what you're saying, they don't correspond. The colors don't necessarily correspond to the order of the planets from the sun outwards. But this is the idea that the sun energy is being, like the light of the sun is being transferred almost like from a prism, and then diverted into those different colors that are giving the roles and the substance of what the different planets are going to be doing with that energy. Yeah, and we have, again, from our perspective on Earth, it makes sense for Mars to be given the agency of outer action because of where it is in the system and against us, and for all the others to be doing what they're doing. Okay, another quick quote. Planets factors acting simultaneously. So here we have something very different from the sun-moon lunation cycle thing that we saw before. The sun and the moon were in this constant variation of what is one doing against the other. Here we have many planets existing together, acting together, and being those different colors mixed in one moment. And maybe sometimes they are in conflict, but this is not the same conflict as, for example, sun square moon. Sun square moon is a different kind of conflict, where the quality of the moon is at that point a very particular one. It is going through some sort of transformation. It is running through a crisis of some sort. Well, with Mars and Venus, for example, we have the function of Mars, the function of Venus. They are all at the same time independently performing what they're meant to perform as a symbolical, role in us, but they may be of different quality. And one pulling in one direction, the other one pulling in another direction. So what were we called? So we have the lunar world is the world of duration, of duality experienced in successive phases. The planetary world is the realm of multiple functional integration. Planets operate all the time, even though the relative intensity of the planet's activities is constantly modified. This being shown in astrology by dignities, that is, their positions in zodiacal signs and houses. So the condition of my Mars could be considered, let's say, slightly weaker, being in Libra, than the condition of, I don't know, do I ever have something strong in my chart? I think most of my planets are either in detriment or in fall, but say if we have Venus in Libra, it's not my case, but for the sake of example, Venus in Libra could be considered at that particular moment of time when we take a look at the system and see what is everybody doing there. Venus is kind of in a good position, in a stronger, more active or more natural position. Mars may be a little bit struggling in Libra, for example, even though I personally don't understand it this way. I think they are exactly what they need to be, and they can be very good, very positive, very kind of to the point in any sign of the zodiac. But yeah, we can see that there is a bit of relationship here. And at the same time, this is happening together simultaneously. And we need to integrate our slightly weaker Mars with our slightly more confident Venus, for example. Okay, so I hope that's clear. Do you get that? Do you understand what we're trying to kind of juxtapose here as a contrast between Sun Moon changes over time and this, which is not that much cycle, but more in the meantime, they all change their qualities and positions. Okay, now there isn't that much left, but there have been many ways, different ways of grouping the planets, always so that we can make sense in some way. I don't say here, this is the only right way. Usually there are three options. I will go before we come here with Mercury, Venus, Earth, and Mars. Let's look at the whole system again quickly. One way to say there are groups of planets, starting from the Earth, we pair Mars with Venus because they're on the two sides of it. Then we will pair Mercury with Jupiter. And then Saturn with the Sun as two contrasting, like the source of life and the limit of the system. This is one way. Then Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, as we said, they are a category of their own. Another way to group them is planets so you group Venus with Mercury because they're on the inner side of the Earth with the Sun. Then you group the Earth with Mars because they're both solid planets and they're massive, like massive globes, and kind of similar. There are reasons why. And then you group Jupiter with Saturn, like the social planets, and we can find logic in all of those ways. And why we can juxtapose again Saturn to Jupiter, Venus to Mercury, and so on. And finally, the last way is everything up to Saturn is one thing, and everything beyond Saturn is another group. And that's quite important, I think, because traditional astrology, as you probably know, is based only on planets up to Saturn. Saturn was the end of it, 7 planets, and the other 3 were discovered later. So this really constitutes the realm up to Saturn, constitutes more or less the body of the system. The other 3 are kind of revolving around that body. Maybe they're the aura of the body or something like this, but they're not really part of it. They're not inside. They are outsiders, all 3 of them. And like people that have them very crucial in their charts tend to be outsiders in one way or another. So the first way, Mercury with Venus, Earth with Mars, and these are planets. So this is the first part of planets of organic living. As Rudhyar divides them in 2 categories: planets of organic living and another type. You see, the organic living types are up to Saturn. Yeah. So in this up to Saturn, we have 3 pairs: Mercury with Venus, the Earth with Mars, and Jupiter with Saturn. And here I selected Venus, Mercury, Earth, Mars, because they are the small ones, the rocky worlds. the ones close to the sun, before the asteroid belt, and so on. There's a sort of a party of their own, a little group. Then, when we look at Jupiter and Saturn, we have two massive gas giants without substance, nowhere to land on Jupiter, for example. And so, yes, it's the meaning of this expansion without boundary that this could be, of things like overeating or overgrowing, that Jupiter is said to mean in the books. That could be associated literally, directly, visually with its size, its enormous size. It's all of the other planets brought together will not be more than Jupiter. Jupiter will still be bigger than them. And the rings of Saturn being the symbol of boundary and of limitation, but also of structure within which something can actually live its life and be productive and stable and so on. And now here, let's ignore Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto for a moment and use this only as an illustration of planets up to Saturn for a moment. Another thing that Dane Rudhyar is kind of opening our eyes for, which is nowhere else discussed, and I think that's missing out, is the fact that there is a two-tide wave going on between the planets and the sun. That there is some sort of motion, movement, I don't know, journey, say, between the sun, so starting from the sun outward. The sun is giving out something, energy, impulse, and releasing that for activity. It's the solar activity. And then it goes from planet to planet. First, this is reflected by Mercury, then by Venus, but then we receive it on Earth, and we kind of, there is something to work with then. Later, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn participate in the flow. So it's like a bloodstream, he says. One direction from Sun to Saturn is like an artery. Artery, like when the heart pumps out the blood and gives it to the organism and to all the parts of the organism, all the body. And the body is assimilating it somehow. You know, it's on a basic organic, actional, initial growing up level. The sun is, you know, giving to the planets things, you know, the energy to play with. Then we reach Saturn. And from Saturn, whatever the result of that outward action was as a process, how well we did our job of, say, integrating our personal planets, understanding them, using them on purpose, really doing with them what our sun was giving as a direction. The sun is some sort of a president saying, you would be fighting for this. Your direction, your purpose is that. And then all of them together are the instruments that are making that happen. And up to Saturn, maybe we did very well, maybe not that much. A process has come to its, maybe we can say, full moon stage, because from when this started, it was like a beginning, a new moon, and then it's just an association. And then up to Saturn, something is completed. And then it goes backwards. So we have an inward cycle as well. Now the planets give back to the sun in a way. Yeah, so I have that as just another image. Now the opposite side, from Saturn to Jupiter to, you know, the rest of them and back to the sun. So now let's be more specific with this. How is this all happening? Let's start with the outward direction, like artery in the blood system. The other one we can call the how was it? The word is escaping me. When the heart receives back the blood, how is that called? Something with P. It was. I'm just forgetting the word at the moment. I'm sorry. So it's
Pulmonary?
yeah, maybe no. That's pulmonary is to do with the lungs, with breathing. Arteries and
Circulation.
Are you-
circulation.
Are you referring to the veins that carry blood back to the heart?
Yes, I think so. How are they called? So, okay, I don't want to confuse you. The word is not important. The names are not important. The importance is the process of from the heart out and from the body back to the heart. You know, we have in us this circulation going on, the blood circulation. And what are you saying? The planet's action, functions are imitating the same process in a way. That we are not only having from Sun to Saturn, but we're also having from Saturn to the Sun backwards. And let's start with from Sun to Saturn. Sun is giving energy. Mercury, the first one, is producing electrical current. So the function of Mercury is symbolically connected to electricity, but not electricity in terms of lightning, not that type of electricity. It's the electricity more of the nervous system, the power of putting things in action in the brain, in the body, and so on, the energizing principle. Then Venus is magnetism. And electricity plus magnetism, we have electromagnetic fields. And this is beginning of the process. So kind of something is getting formed there, something is getting born. An electromagnetic field is something like the basis of personality, isn't it? Of our archetypes then that make us, all the signs of the zodiac, all the things inside us. And then we reach the Earth where Venus and Mercury have already been affected by the sun and they've created this electromagnetic field. Let's say we have now formed an idea who we are and what we want to do with ourselves, with our life. We are feeling alive for the first time. Then we need to do something with this, act it out, assert it, reinforce it. Here comes the function of Mars, the next one. We can do that well or not well. We can be overly aggressive with an exaggerated ego, because if the values created by Venus through the mental capacity of Mercury were not of very good quality, then Mars is going to result in some very chaotic action. Mars is probably going to be aggressive, lost, non-concentrated. But if Venus and Mercury's process was, let's say, positive, then we have a very effective warrior then going out to present the personality and expand it. And we expand in the Jupiter stage, where we now mix with others and we learn cooperation, we learn participation, and kind of get informed by outside forces as well. Very, very like scratching the surface here, but it's just the logic of it. And how well we do that, whether we do too much of this, whether we consume too much. Jupiter is a symbol of assimilation of substance in the organism. So it is to do with those organs that actually assimilate all the substances that we get in. And maybe we will be able to, through our food, let's say, maybe that's intellectual food, maybe that's our education or our beliefs or our, influences from outside, from the culture in general, from the world, or not. So here it's like a school a little bit, that process of Jupiter. And then Saturn is meant to stabilize us in a way, to show us where is our place in all this, to designate a place, to form draw a boundary around us, to have a bit of a certainty what you can do, what are your abilities, how you can act out, to have your right place in the society because you have earned it, you have somehow integrated in it. Yes, you are also limited by that, and this limitation has a good quality about it because you feel like I'm a separate person. I know myself. I know now how I need to. Maybe I can contribute something now from the perspective of my wholeness. That as an ego, as a structure, if everything went well in this, outward from the sun process, here with positive Saturn, we have somebody that can be a teacher to somebody else, a helper, a builder, a creator. Yes, usually mostly concerned with keeping the old forms and maintaining stability, but still it is participating in a very meaningful way. And now we can then go backwards. And there is this backwards running. And from Saturn now. So if that was okay, Saturn is starting to create things, social organizations, structures, and to have the values to exchange with other people and create. Now Jupiter becomes a different kind of Jupiter. It's not like in the first part when it was about expansion, consumption, learning, and so on. Here it's the shared ideas, the shared qualities with other people that can build cultural, things, the education system, the law, religion, and so on and so forth. And it's something more creative, like the real meaning of Sagittarius, the builder of social forms. Then let's suppose that this Jupiter stage here, we are very convinced in something, in an idea, we want to make it happen more and more in more concrete forms, kind of starting from the big and making it affect every single person or something like this. Mars becomes an agent of that. Mars, it's like the force of work, physical work that you then do in order to implement your ideas or to spread them out or to teach or whatever it is. So Mars becoming an agent to Jupiter and Saturn. Then we reach the Earth again, on which the game is actually played, and then we can see the results, whether something is created, which can be left behind, which has value, and then the last two planets, Venus and Mercury, are overseeing the value of those things that we have created in the process. It's very similar to what goes on in the second part of the lunar cycle, from full moon to the next new moon. This social kind of giving back. So you have been building your personality from the Sun to Saturn, and from Saturn to the Sun, you are giving out this built personality and kind of sharing it with the world and making a positive difference, trying to make a positive difference. And if Venus at the end of the day is well developed, this idea of this planet being a higher octave of another planet. So Venus and Mercury are meant to have their higher octaves in Neptune and Pluto. So here is the key in this second part from Saturn to the Sun, that Venus to be raised up to another level where this values and forms that it was building in the first part are converted to unconditional love and exchange between people, and this higher level of relationship and exchange of all sorts of things that Venus could be: resources, values, aesthetic things, art, creativity, many things. Then that's going to be the key to become, say, Neptune, instead of staying on the basic first half of the cycle, primal, Venus expression. And Mercury at the end is not just the concrete mind that is able to kind of work with information and data and order, make sense of it and so on. But here is the ideas that can be left behind. It's seeds, says Rudhyar. So for all this whole process, there were, the process is completed. It's almost like a lifetime of a person or one lunar cycle. And now we've reached the end and something is left. What could be left is only things that can be written down, say in books, or maybe nowadays they could be on film, or they could be in some sort of abstract form. So the participants are gone, new generations come, but this thing remains, the ideas, the information, the one that was selected at the end and was kind of remaining to be left behind. So that's the so-called higher octave of, eventually, maybe, of Mercury, or simply Mercury that has served its purpose back to the Sun, so back to the source of life. It has helped that whole process when the next time this thing needs to happen, to now be at another level, not on that same level that was the last time around. It's similar to thinking that maybe new generations are supposed to kind of do something at the same things at a slightly different level than the previous generations, doing the same process, but kind of bringing it as a spiral up. Of course, if this whole thing doesn't work out well, as is the case most of the time with most people, because here the planets are symbols of the energies inside us, the functions inside us, how we integrate them all together. And very often, at least in one connection, something is not working. and needs work and needs, in order for the cycle to come back, there are very few individuals that really do this whole journey from Sun to Saturn and back successfully and meaningfully. Most of the time, we get stuck somewhere. And we can maybe diagnose where we are stuck by looking at the chart and seeing aspects of planets, positions, dignitaries, things like that, that can give us a clue which of those functions. And by the way, Rudhyar has a very brilliant book, Astrological Study of Psychological Complexes. And in that book, again, available there on the same website, he is going through different complexes and problems that can be related to each planet. Almost like a bit of a diagnosis that a certain condition or issue is related to a dysfunctional, say, Saturn or Mercury or Venus or whatever it is. And there he goes into more detail about the meanings of those planets, the way I just told you. If you wish to really like be specific about your chart or somebody's chart and see. Okay.
I have a quick question, Rodolina. I'm sorry about the previous slide. In terms of the solar tide and how that energy flows out, does Rudhyar talk about how it's effective when the outer planets beyond Saturn are connected to someone's personal inner planets? So if someone's Uranus is with their Jupiter or Pluto with their Saturn, how does that work, I guess, in terms of the flow of the energy, considering that those two things are then linked up? Does that energy then continue to flow out beyond Saturn for that particular person? Or does it still stop there and it's changed?
Very good question. He talks a lot about this, not that much in this book, The Practice of Astrology, because it's rather short, but in other places a lot. It's a big thing to have those personal planets, the last three, somehow involved with the others. And they are all planets of transformation, of metamorphosis, of crisis. It's something that is trying to pull you away from Saturn and from the structure, the structure that we just looked at. All three of them are doing it in a different way, but there is something in common. They are trying to break the pattern and to introduce something else, maybe something greater into it. Let's look at that. I will continue answering your question, but I think this is part of it. The greatness of man is that he can always be greater. This urge to be greater, this incessant reaching out for vaster horizons and for the beyond of the known, is latent in every individual. It beats upon the consciousness or the feelings of men who are more daring or more restless, more evolved or more abnormal. It seizes them with a passion for transcendence and a rebelliousness against all traditions and limitations. It accesses the set Saturnian frames of reference with an insistence from which anger and fury are not always absent. So that's a bit of what we can expect from them when they get involved, and they are always involved in the picture. In some charts, maybe one of those three planets is not a big factor, or maybe none of them are that obviously a big factor. So they're not with the sun or the moon or one of the planets in a very close aspect or something like this. But with some people, they are so intertwined with them that we really cannot separate the function. I have, for example, Sun conjunct Pluto. I don't think that makes it possible to really speak about my Sun without involving Pluto. It's no longer a pure solar, let's say it never is, because they're always in a relationship with one another. But you see, Pluto becomes a very big factor in the kind of energy, substance energy, that will be projected out in the first place for me to work with. And you can do the same with the rest of the planets. But it is considered to be special, say, and more difficult also, when somebody has the three trans-Saturnian planets as big factors, because they are trying to somehow challenge the stability of the Saturnian ego structure that we have been building and working with, So I explain it for myself in this way, that this process that we just saw, the inward and the outward, from Saturn to the Sun and back, is always there. It's always going. Yeah, it's somewhere, we are all at different stages of it or at different levels of it or something. This is our own person integration. Saturn marks our skeleton, our boundary, and also our ego boundary. And then we participate with that. We live our life with that. But then how much of a role Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto play will condition inevitably whether we'll be willing to get out of this, to maybe get something into the system which is foreign and integrated, and then this way make it better, or make it risk breaking it as well, not just make it better. There is a lot of risk involved with the transpersonal planets, isn't it? Because they pull us to become something better and greater than Saturn, but that's not a straightforward process. And they're all talking about processes of elimination, of transformation, of metamorphosis. So where was it where I said planets of trans? Yeah, here, metamorphosis. That's it. We need to change, but up to Saturn is some sort of a mechanism that doesn't like change, doesn't want to. It wants to stabilize, it wants to assert, and it wants to repeat. Now, up to from Uranus, we are provoked to make a different step in another direction. And some people are more inclined, others are not. Then Neptune is like a big dissolver of substance. Once Saturn was broken by Uranus, Neptune can clean the debris and can bring us into a higher non-material consciousness. Because Saturn, don't forget, Saturn is very material. It's a so-called earthly planet, a planet of structure, of physical reality. All the three at the end are not. And they are a counterforce as a group. Pluto, the greatest transformer, Pluto is related to what happens after Neptune, when things were destroyed, were taken apart, and the beginning of the process of re-emergence, of rebirth. Maybe that's why very often automatically you connect Pluto with Scorpio. They have a lot in common, yes, the symbol of reincarnation, of going to the bottom and then bringing yourself up again, being reborn to a new life or a new kind of life. And this death is not supposed to be a literal death. It's some sort of transformation, personal transformation, which requires that we give up the rigid structures of Saturn and those things that are no longer serving in the Saturnian structure, and somehow update ourselves over time and overcome the inertia, because Saturn, negative Saturn, is inertia, repetition of the same thing again and again when it's no longer viable. And but it's so difficult for everyone to embrace Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. Very different. In any case, also depending on the chart, some people are pushing for it because they have them strong in the chart and they're trying to even affect others and, kind of stimulate their change. Others are like they don't want to be. They're scared of this energy because it's quite intensive. So let's take a look. This is the last one. I know we already have no idea where we are, almost at the end of the regular time. But transcendence and growth is the ultimate purpose of those three. I'm not sure I understand them yet. They are quite mysterious, aren't they? They're quite magical. And recently discovered, we are now to have the challenge to integrate them more and more. And Rudhyar is saying here, it is to the aura of the solar system, considered as a strictly defined and self-sufficient cosmic entity, that Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto belong. They represent three characteristic modes of interaction between this solar system and the greater whole in which it is operating, the galaxy. They are in the space field surrounding the solar system, but not of it. They do not belong to our system because they are the agents of the galaxy. They are witnesses to and servants of this immense cosmic existence. So I guess we have a lot to learn from people that naturally exhibit, those energies, and also not forget that they are not the source of them. That usually they're just channels of them. If you have a strong Neptune, you are not Neptune. You're not knowing what Neptune is. You're just more presupposed, preconditioned to be a receptor, a good receptor of those cosmic energies, and then through you demonstrate to our constrained Saturnian world what it means to be Neptunian, for example, or to get something from that reality. And same for the rest. So I will end with 3 different books this time, not the same as last time. Luckily, Rudhyar has wrote so many books that even if I want to show you 3 after every talk, they won't be the same. But no, these 3, this is now being serious again. This is very related to the talk today, to the topics of the planets, the houses, and the signs. If you want to go in more detail, the lunation cycle, the big classic that maybe he's known mostly for the lunation cycle. And then the pulse of life, which is Oncodia. That's about the zodiac and the process and every sign, step by step. The day force, the night force, it's great. And finally, the astrological houses, that book that gives the definitions about every house, but one by one as a process again. So the second house, what we do there, what happens to us there, the experiences, they're conditioned by the first and following to the third. So again, a system is presented and not like individual definitions and like keywords that we, it really helped me as much as I could understand it, because I still don't know if I grasped all of their meanings. But constantly going back to this book, especially for consultations, because when I see a full house or a very accentuated house, I go back and read the thing about this house from Rudhyar, and it's reminding me what actual things, actual advice I can give, because there is nothing more concrete in astrology than the houses when you want to, even predict realities. So that was it for me. I'm at least glad I managed within scheduled time. I'm sorry I didn't leave too much but we had a bit of conversation here and there. So I hope this is the most theoretical part of this book. There is gonna be nothing like this from now on. So if this was too much information for you, I'm sorry, but this is, I wanted to split it. There was no better way to split those topics. Couldn't leave the planets outside. So next time we're gonna be in a more relaxed mode. I think it's aspects coming. I'm not 100% sure, but we can speak more, and we'll be looking again probably at the lunation cycle, then to apply to the aspects and try to understand how this works.
Thank you. I think you did a great job. I learned something. I feel inspired by it. And so I just want to thank you for doing that quite intensive communication.
Thank you, Lauren. Really appreciate it.
And I actually, this time, for the first time, I feel inspired to run my chart. And with the system, you say the Campana is what you use?
Yes. You can use Campanus, you can use Regiomontanus. They're both on the same principle. But Rudhyar had a preference for Campanus. Mostly because...
look at it again.
Mm-hmm.
I think I did well for as long as I've gone in my way, but I'd like to really have a more serious look at it. And I enjoyed your presentation.
Thank you so much, Lauren. No, that was the point, to be inspired to look at the chart now from a different angle. And I thank you very much for staying so long. See you too, Michaela, Robin. Let's say goodbye now, and until next time.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rodalina.
Great.
Until next time.
Appreciate it. I've learned a lot.
Thank you.
I'm enjoying my learning.
Me too.
I'll see you again next week then.
Yes.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.